Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Richardson. I work in communications here at the Bank of Canada, and I'm happy to be your moderator for this session. Welcome to our RPAA webinar. Today, we're going to focus on the topic of registration. We're happy to see that so many of you are able to join us for this live event. We are recording today's presentation to make it available for anyone who can't attend. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the land of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We pay respect to Indigenous peoples across the country and to their ancestors for their immeasurable contributions to this country. We are joining you today from Ottawa, the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I'm delighted to be here today with Umar Faruqui, the Director of Registration Program. We're also joined online by our colleagues from the Retail Payment Supervision Team, John McGregor, Dave Pouliot, and Wendy Morgan. Today we'll be sharing who needs to register with the bank, how to apply for registration, and when. And you'll also get a sneak peek into PSP Connect, our online portal that launches on November 1st. But first, Umar, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for kicking us off. And a big thanks again to all of you online for taking the time to join this webinar. I'll take probably around 15 minutes or so to talk about what payment service providers need to do as our regime goes live on the 1st of November this year, which, in case anyone is counting, is 28 days from now. We will also provide a preview of our IT solution, which is called PSP Connect, and that's a solution that payment service providers will be using to submit their application for registration with the Bank of Canada. But before we get into the specifics of the scope of our retail payment supervision regime, it's useful to remind ourselves about the Retail Payment Activities Act, or RPAA for short, and its purpose. So the RPAA was passed in 2021, and that act established the Bank of Canada as the supervisor for payment service providers. The purpose of the Retail Payment Activities Act is to protect the integrity of retail payments in Canada and to safeguard consumer funds. And some of the ways that the Act aims to achieve this goal is by ensuring that operational risks are mitigated and that end-user funds that are held by payment service providers are protected. The Act imposes 5 main requirements for in-scope payment service providers, or PSPs. The first of these requirements is to register with the Bank of Canada. The second requirement, which is closely related to the first one, is to pay the fee that's part of the registration process. Now, these 2 requirements will be coming into force on November 1st of this year. The third requirement that the Act imposes is that in-scope payment service providers will need to have a framework to manage their operational risk and incident response. Fourth, if a payment service provider holds end-user funds, it will need to have measures to safeguard these funds. And fifth and last, payment service providers will need to report incidents, significant changes, and any new activity to the bank, and on an annual basis to provide some key metrics. Now, the last 3 requirements, which is on the lower row on this slide, these will be coming into effect in September of 2025 rather than November this year. So let's delve further into the requirement for in-scope payment service providers to register with the Bank of Canada. Now, based on the provisions of the Act and the associated regulations, the bank has put together a 4-step application test to help stakeholders answer the question, am I in scope of the Act? Now, these steps are outlined on the slide here. And the first of these steps is to see if an entity meets the definition of a payment service provider. Second, the entity must perform a payment function in relation to an electronic fund transfer in a fiat currency. Third, it must meet the geographic scope criteria of the Act. And then finally, the entity must not be otherwise excluded from the application of the Act. Now, if an entity meets all 4 of these criteria, it would be considered to be in scope of the Act and will have an obligation to register with the Bank of Canada. Now, I'm going to take the next 2 slides to delve a bit more into how the Act defines a PSP and the geographic scope of the Retail Payments Activities Act. So the Act stipulates that an entity is considered to be a payment service provider if it performs at least one of the 5 payment functions listed on this slide. The law also includes the concept of an incidental business activity, and the guidance and case scenarios available on our website provide more insight into how to interpret this concept of incidental. Moving to geographic scope of the Act, here the main thing to note is that the Act is location agnostic. This means that the Retail Payments Activities Act would be applicable to foreign companies that direct services to Canadian consumers or businesses, just as it would apply to companies that are based in Canada. The bank's supervision of the retail payments sector will be an adjustment for many of the entities that operate in this space. To help with that adjustment, the bank has made a number of resources available on our website, and I'll talk through some of these key resources in the next few slides. To help assess if an entity needs to register with the bank, the key online resources are shown on this slide. So the most important of these is our supervisory policy, which is titled Criteria for Registering Payment Service Providers. Now that policy outlines and goes into a lot of detail about the 4-step application test that we talked about in an earlier slide. The bank has also developed a number of case scenarios, and these are examples of how the Act applies to selected business models or situations. And we've been adding to our repository of case scenarios over the last year. In fact, the latest set of these scenarios were published just yesterday and include scenarios related to payment gateways and lending models like buy now, pay later. Our website also includes a self-assessment tool that encapsulates the 4-step application test in an easy-to-use and interactive format. Now, once an entity has come to the view that it is, in fact, in scope of the RPAA and needs to register with the bank, our website also has some very helpful resources to help to aid with the registration process. The most important of these is the step-by-step guide, which is essentially a registration application manual. This guide goes through every question that will be asked as part of the application form and explains how applicants may want to respond to these questions. As a side note, I think it would be important to mention that as applicants are filling out the application starting in November, they should take care to make sure that it is complete and all the necessary details are provided, whether they're part of the application form or as additional attachments. We also have a number of other resources that are available on our website to help with the registration process, and these include the frequently asked questions, as well as the registration-related guidance, for example, about amendments to application. Now, over the course of the year, the bank has been actively involved in outreach to the Canadian retail payments market, and increasingly one of the questions we receive is, what happens if an in-scope payment service provider does not register with the bank? Now, I'm going to make 3 main points as a response to this question. The first one is just to state that the law is quite explicit that it is mandatory for all in-scope payment service providers to register with the bank. What that means in practice is that if you are an in-scope payment service provider and have not registered with the bank, you should not be performing those payment services going forward. The second point to note is that the bank will start to take steps at the end of our application window, which is the middle of November, right? We expect that there are more than 3,000 payment service providers that will need to register with the bank. And once the registration application period has closed, we will be taking steps to remind those PSPs that have not registered to carefully review their scope and register with the bank as appropriate. The final point here is that, of course, enforcement action is a tool that the bank can leverage in the event of continued non-compliance. We've published guidelines recently on our enforcement processes, and as in that guideline, failure to register with the bank is considered a very serious infraction and potentially subject to monetary penalty of up to $10 million. So I've been referring to some of the upcoming timelines in previous slides, but let's bring all of this together and walk through some of the selected key dates. 1st of November 2024 is a really exciting date for us. That's the date when the Retail Payments Activities Act will start to be in effect in Canada. And I say start to be in effect because not all of the requirements or the provisions of the Act will be in effect on November 1st. The two that will start to be in effect will be the obligation to register with the bank and to pay the application fee. Payment service providers will have 15 calendar days starting November 1st to submit a registration application with the bank and to pay the fee. The registration period will close at the end of day on 15th November. And then the bank will have roughly 8 months to process the large volume of applications that it has received. On September 8th, 2025, the bank will start publishing its registration decisions. And this is also the date when some of the other requirements of the Act, namely those related to operational risk management and end-user fund safeguarding, will come into force. Of course, the bank will continue to add and refine its published documents to help the industry and end users adjust to this regime over the next months. And one that I will call out in particular is the finalized guidance on operational risk and end-user fund safeguarding, which we expect to publish in coming months. So we're now going to move on to the next part of our presentation and provide a demo of PSP Connect. As I mentioned before, PSP Connect is the name of our bespoke IT solution. And this tool is going to be used to help manage the information flow related to the Retail Payment Activities Act. Now, PSP Connect is going to be used by payment service providers to register with the bank, and it is also the portal through which all subsequent communication between the bank and the payment service providers will occur. My colleague, Dave Puyot, will now provide a peek into what to expect when the PSP Connect portal is open on the 1st of November. And I'm going to pass it over to Dave now.
Here's how to access PSP Connect. Select Register. Enter the required information to create an administrator profile for your organization. Other representatives can be added once the account is created. Provide the required information in the CAPTCHA and click Submit. You will then receive an email from the bank that contains instructions to complete your profile creation. From this email, click on Complete User Account Setup. There can be a slight delay before you receive the email. If you have not received the email after a few minutes, please check your junk mail folder before contacting the bank. Once you've selected the Complete User Account Setup link in the email, it will automatically direct you to the invitation code page. Click the Register button on the page. The sign-in page will then be displayed. At this stage, do not enter an email address or password. Your account has not been created. You've only created your profile. Instead, click on Register Now. At this stage of the process, you'll need to enter your email address and select Send Verification Code. Then refer to your email for the code. Enter the verification code that you received by email and select Verify Code. Do not try to create a password before entering the verification code. The system will not allow it. Once you see email address verified, then you can create a password. Fill out the rest of the fields and select Create. Once you have successfully created your password, the system will automatically require that each user sets up a multi-factor authentication, MFA. To do so, please follow the instructions on your screen to complete the process. Once you've completed your account setup, you'll be presented with this screen and you'll have the opportunity to update your profile if needed. Some fields will be pre-populated with information the bank will have used when creating the first steps of the account setup. Please make sure that all the mandatory fields are completed and select Update at the bottom of the page. You are now ready to start completing the registration application form. Once you're connected to your account, you'll be able to navigate to the top menu bar where you will be able to update your profile and add new contact by selecting My Account. View your application form, its status, submit an amendment, and view the registry once it's published at CIF2 by selecting Registration. Access the messages sent by the bank to inform you the status of your application or to ask you to provide additional information to complete our evaluation under the Message Center. And consult the reference documents as well as FAQs that could be useful during the registration application process under the Resources and Help section. Navigate to the middle of the page and select Start a Registration Application. Please read carefully the notice and confirm that you have read and that you accept the notice by selecting the checkbox. Click on Submit. The main page of the registration form will then be displayed. The registration application form contains 18 different sections. Click on a section title to access it. The sections do not need to be completed in a specific order, although some need to be completed to complete the next one. The progress bar at the top of the page will give you an indication on your progress. The status for each section will move from incomplete to complete as you move along the form. Once all the sections are completed, click on Submit Application. You are now required to fill out the form in one shot. If you need to sign out, click on Sign Out. To log into PSP Connect again, select Sign In. Enter your email address and password and select Sign In. The system will then prompt a multi-factor authentication where you will be asked to enter the number on your phone using the multi-factor authentication application that you downloaded. Select Verify. If you have any questions, you can contact the bank by using the Contact Us form that can be found in the footer of the web page. For any technical assistance, please contact our service desk using the phone number provided on this page.